As promised, I'm gonna check the alignment on this 911 after doing some front suspension work. I replaced the front bushings and the control arms because they were very heavily worn and super mushy. So the car is driving much better. It did solve the problem under heavy braking. It would veer to the right. Because those bushings were so bad, I am gonna check the toe, the camber, and the caster on the front of this car. Previously, I had checked the weight balance and it was off by like 40 pounds. That's not that significant. So I'm not gonna do that again. I'm not gonna adjust the corner balance until I replace the rear bushings. That'll be an upcoming video, but for now, this is my daily driver. I want to check the front, make sure it's at least in tolerance, and then we'll do a more comprehensive corner balance and rear toe and camber and basically the full alignment. That takes a long time, so I'm just, like I said, gonna start here at the front. To check the toe, I'm gonna be using this frame fixture that I built for my yellow car, which is a F-type long hood. So I had to make some adjustments. I basically sawed this off. This is what hooks onto the front latch panel. And basically I made it adjustable. So this goes in and out. And then this is the new position I need for the G model. So like I said, that just clips into the hood open area and then it makes contact with this bumper strip, or at least it does on that side. So this bar goes along the front of the car and this height has been adjusted to the height of the wheels, the center of the wheels. And then there's these 3 marked impressions in this tubing. And that's where the string goes. The string goes probably on this innermost line, and it's gonna run to the back of the car, and it's perfectly parallel because these machined marks are the same for the front and the rear. I had to modify the rear even more because of these huge overriders. My other car doesn't have these, so this has been lengthened significantly. That's probably almost a foot. But same idea, it's adjustable, and then the bar is adjustable in height with those different hole positions. So same thing, we have these 3 marks here on the end, and that corresponds with the center of the wheel. So we're basically just gonna run parallel strings across the side of the car. The string method is actually very accurate. It takes a little longer to set up, but it's pretty good. The other method is to just use jack stands and put this bar on a jack stand. The nice thing about this is it does speed things up, and I'm able to settle the suspension without moving the strings. So I can push on the car and the strings move with it. I can roll the car in and out, and that makes a big difference in how accurate your measurements are because you want to measure it in the driving condition. If you've lifted it up and put it back down, there's a little extra friction on the tires. I have some friction plates, but basically I like having the bars attached to the car. It does save a little bit of time. And I use fishing line. This stuff's pretty thin. It doesn't take a lot of tension to get a straight line, especially if it's fishing line because it's so lightweight. I just tied a loop on that end and we just roll it back here. Maybe hard to see the fishing line, but it goes right through the center line of the wheel. So these rags are, protecting the paint, but it's also just helping me just lift up the strings slightly. I can adjust it with those wing nuts down there, but I find the rags are necessary anyway, so I'm just using that. You want the strings to be, the same on both sides as much as possible, although it's not critical. So I'm gonna slide the bar in the bracket because it needs to come over to the passenger side just a little bit. So we loosen these thumb screws and I can just rotate this ever so slightly. So I've got my steering wheel clocked straight. That's just how I want it, right there. Just one final check that my strings are in the grooves and the sockets are not bottomed out and there's no contact to the tires. This is pretty close, within a ½ inch. I like it a little closer because there's less measurement error. On the front, there's naturally going to be more clearance because there is a stagger to these cars, but don't compensate for the stagger by making the strings not parallel. The strings have to be parallel. Here the string is in the groove. The strings are all set right now. It took me about 15 minutes, but that's after I reconfigured the fixtures. So once the fixtures are configured and you note on there which holes to use, you can set up the strings in, like I said, like 15 minutes max. I spent a couple hours reconfiguring the frames, but they are useful. So now I'm going to take the measurements, and this is what we need. I use an online calculator. It's super easy to use. The advantage of the online calculator is it can cancel out any of the errors associated with getting the strings even left to right. So even if the strings are not parallel to the center line of the car, the calculator can cancel that effect out with some accurate measurements. And all you really need is the wheelbase in order to cancel out that parallelism error. And I'm going to measure off the rim. You can use the tires if you want, but the rim I think is just a little bit more accurate. So I sight straight down, and I can get this to within ½ millimeter or less because the string is so fine. So this does have enough resolution to give you very accurate readings. I got a little bit of toe in the front and a little toe out on the right front. So the total toe in the front is 0.15. That's in degrees. So the specification is 15 minutes. So plus minus 5 minutes. So the minimum 10 minutes would be 0.16 degrees, which I'm at 0.15. And the max would be 0.33 degrees. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to dial in a little more toe in on the right front because we don't want it toeing out. The other thing on the spreadsheet, I'll put a link in the description below how to find this, but the total angle between the chassis and the center lines was 0.07. That's what I was saying earlier. The angle or the distance from the tires for all four corners don't need to be exact. I was off by 0.07. So the calculator will subtract out that error and give you the total toe for front and rear. The thrust angle between the rear wheels is small, 0.01. That's basically if your rear wheels are pointed, you know, to do a crab walk. That's minimal, that's fine. The rear toe is 0.22. I think that's within spec. And it is toeing in on both sides pretty even. So it's not too bad. Just need to do a little attention to the right front. For the next measurement, which is camber, I needed to remove the center cap. So I lifted the car up, took the cap off, and then put it back down and rolled it all the way out into the neighbor's driveway, which is like 30 feet plus, and then rolled it back in. So the tire needs several rotations before it can truly be settled. This device is the Longacre caster camber gauge, and it can do positive camber, negative camber, and the gauge itself comes with some adapters. I don't have the right adapter that fits inside this hub. So what I've done is I've welded this thing, this Y-shaped thing, and it's got these machined plastic pads on it. This one's adjustable in height, so this is a 16-inch wheel, and it fits the wheel nice and snug. And these little pads have to touch the outside of the rim. And when I do that, it's showing basically zero camber. Less than 1/4 of a degree, it's like, you know, less than 0.1 degrees. I've definitely checked the gauge compared to my post here and other levels. This is 0. So to do this one, I got to use some parallels. These are machinist parallels, pretty accurate. So if I hold this just right, hold it up to the lift, this thing is perfectly 0. So, and that's how I know to read the edge of the bubbles. That's 0. And then on the car, it's just slightly negative camber, not much at all. This one is more camber. This is negative 0.75 degrees. So left front is negative 0.1, right front is negative 0.8, left rear is negative 0.75, and right rear is negative 1.3. Okay, I just looked up the specs. For the front, it's plus minus 10 minutes, which is, I don't think you ever want positive camber, so forget the plus, but should be minus 0.16 degrees. You just take the 10, divide by 60, that gives you degrees. So it's technically within spec, but very small amount of camber. I'll probably dial in at least the left front. I'll probably try to at least match it to the right front. The rear is, the spec is minus 1 degree plus minus 10 minutes. This means the left rear is a little bit out of spec. It should be minus 1 and it's minus 0.75. The right rear is a little bit out of spec too. So the left rear is under, the right rear is over. So that should be evened out. I'm not gonna work on the rear today, but I am gonna make some changes to the front. The reason why I don't want to work on the rear is because I want to change those bushings. So any changes I do now would get erased with new bushing. And then as I said, this will measure caster too, so we might as well do that. However, the procedure for measuring caster requires slip plates. So that's what this is. This is I'm gonna roll the car on top of this sandpaper surface, and we're gonna turn the wheels and measure we're gonna turn it, to the right, turn it to the left. These are predefined lines on this window. So when I turn it, I think it's 20 degrees. These will line up this way. We'll start it with 0, and then we'll do 20 degrees the other way. And while the wheel is turned, basically caster is how much of it spins on, it turns on a axis that's inclined. So if we turn it a little bit this way, turn it a little bit that way, we can measure how much the axis is inclined. That is the caster angle. So I verified that the wheels are pointed straight ahead, steering wheel is pointing straight ahead, and these lines are parallel. So I'm gonna go in the car and I'm gonna turn the wheel 20 degrees to the left because I'm working on the left front. And then I'll put the gauge on and zero it out. So those lines on that green plate that are inscribed are 20 degrees. So sometimes I just put a ruler on here and make sure I'm getting the right set of lines because the line is broken up by the window. This is correct. The lines, I just need to move it a little bit more. Just like that. So now I have everything parallel to the ruler. That's 20 degrees to the left. So I'm gonna put this here on the wheel just like we did for camber, and it's important that we zero it out in 2 ways. This bubble has to be centered so the gauge is level, and then this bubble is adjustable with this little knob here. So I'm gonna use the center of the bubble to be 0. We'll get the actual caster reading when we turn the wheels 20 degrees to the right now. Oh, it's so easy to turn the wheel. It's nice. Once again, just use the ruler, make sure we got the right set of lines. I might have overdone it. Yeah, that's too much. That's okay, we just back it up so it's parallel to that ruler. Right there. And then this time we use the gauge again, and we need to make sure, once again, the gauge is level using this center bubble. It's showing 8 degrees of positive caster. I'm not sure that's correct. That seems like too much, but Okay, I verified the right front was 7.8 degrees of caster. The left is 8 degrees. So I did look online, and it's not uncommon for Carreras to have 8 degrees caster. That's how it came from the factory. Here's a look at these strut towers. This is the adjustment for caster and camber. And this tar material is typically applied at the factory. This is an adjustment. However, I don't know this has ever been adjusted. So these look like they're still lined up. These markings I think are probably just to verify that they were torqued, but both sides, you know, look like they're a little bit cracked, but I don't know if this has ever been adjusted. It doesn't appear that this material has been reapplied because it's pretty much solid at this point. Very stiff and very brittle. Normally I would use a heat gun here, but because it's around all this tubing, I don't want to melt anything but the tar. And it's so brittle, it's just coming off anyways. I've cleaned most of that tar off. Didn't scratch the paint at all. I'm not scraping the paint. I'm just taking whatever will chip off easily. These plates will move, and then this bearing holder, or bushing holder, will also move to adjust the camber. So I want to take this and shift it in. But I guess what I wanted to show you is that none of this flange here is dinged or bent. Normally when these things get aligned by a shop, they'll just put pry tools in there and they'll move it. So none of that has been altered at all. This has probably never been adjusted. Also, the caster looks like it's pretty much maxed out. So this bushing plate is pretty much touching this flange here, which would be max caster. Caster is this way, camber is this way. So just wanted to show you that. I've got the bolts loosed. I'm gonna move this. I'm just gonna target like 1/2 degree of camber. Nothing more than that for a street car or for a cabriolet. So right now it's 0.1. I just want to go 0.5 and then maybe bring the other side back to 0.5. It's 0.8. Okay, I was able to adjust this side to, you know, just about what I wanted. This is 0.5. Okay, this side has been adjusted to same thing. Let's get the 0 bubble done. Doesn't make that much difference, but this is 0.5 on the right front. And I also got the left front at 0.5. The caster is still maxed out back here at about 7.8 or 8. Apparently the Carreras can do more caster than previous cars. This is an 87. So now we're up a little bit so we can get access to that right front tie rod. We want to make that slightly longer to improve that toe out condition on the right front. This is the tie rod that goes out to the wheel. And there's a jam nut on this side and a jam nut on this side, closer to the rack. A little hard to see here, but these are actually 7/8 of an inch, as best as I can tell. And then there's a little flat spot here in the center of the tie rod itself. You just put a crescent wrench on there or an adjustable wrench, make it tight, and then I just turned it like, you can see, basically 1/2 a turn. Here's the new sheet. I got it pretty close. The toe in might be a little bit much, but it's 0.2 degrees on the left, 0.18 degrees on the right. So it's pretty well balanced. We also got the camber more balanced at 0.5 degrees. So I think that's gonna make a difference. The rear is pretty much unchanged. I didn't touch the rear. So yeah, let's take it for a test drive and see how it goes. The spec for this is 0.3. The total is about 0.3, so it's pretty much at the higher end of the toe-in range. This is going to give a lot of straight line stability. That's no hands for a really long time. All right, I just got back from a little test drive just around town here, and it's driving great. The straight line braking is much improved. I think largely because of the new bushings in the front and also correcting those camber differences. It stops really nice. It could be better. I think the corner balancing and the rear. So when I hit the brakes hard, it doesn't pull the steering wheel at all. The steering wheel stays put even if you let go, hit the brakes. It seems like the rear is like turning. So I think the same thing is true with the back. I think the bushings in the back need to be done, and potentially it's towing out under braking when the back comes up a little bit. So it's, like I said, very subtle. The thing tracks really straight. I took a little video going down PCH, and the tow is pretty aggressive, so it just drives like an arrow. So I'm happy with it. It's definitely safe to drive. I don't know how long it's gonna be before I get the bushings done in the back, so I wanted to at least be able to continue to drive it. So thanks again for checking this out. Any questions, leave them in the comments below. I always try to answer all of them.